I don't think our industry is in a good place. I think our industry is becoming increasingly weird and dangerous and full of bad actors.
Before we get into the interview, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Elgato. We've had a lot of great creators on this podcast over the past 10 weeks. And what do they all have in common? An excellent streaming setup. Our friends at Elgato have launched the Wave DX, their first ever XLR microphone. And combined with the Wave XLR audio interface and the Wave mic arms, the Wave DX gives you the opportunity to level up your streaming setup. At a stunning $100 price point, the Wave DX outperforms much of the other microphones in its class. To learn more about the microphone, head over to elgato.com and check out the Wave DX. That's ELGATO.com. Thanks to Elgato for sponsoring this episode, and now back to our interview.
It felt very appropriate, and I'll do a little bit longer intro here to have Richard Lewis on the show. Richard is the editor-at-large at Dexerto. He is a multi-time award winner of the Esports Awards Journalist of the Year award. One of the oldest, most seasoned veterans of esports journalism. Has broken hundreds of stories, as I'm sure many remember, and is responsible for and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit, is responsible for the lifetime ban of a series of Counter-Strike Global Offensive players who were involved in a match-fixing scandal now half a dozen years ago, and has also continued to do that work throughout his career. Richard worked as the host of E-League, which was Turner Broadcasting's televised event series, esports event series, working events in Rocket League, Counter-Strike, and other games. And Richard is now joining us. So, Richard, how are you doing?
Yeah, great. It's already been a long day because the major's going on in Rio, the CSGO major. So already streamed for, I don't know, 12 hours or something ridiculous. But it's Halloween night and you get an invitation from Jacob Wolf to come on a podcast. You don't say no, right? So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to sort of tee up a little bit here, I first met Richard in late 2014. Like many people, I would imagine in this space, I was a sort of hardcore esports fan studying in university. As that was the freshman semester of my sophomore year. Watched a crazy amount of League of Legends in any given week and consumed sort of the content creators around it. B. Thorin, Kelsey Moser, Emily Rand, Michael Lalore, Richard, and many of the others that were doing work back at the time, and had a very strong opinion about a Dignitas roster change and called into Richard's show. Yeah. Asked Richard's opinion or whatever, even appeared on camera for that. Sam piped me in on the camera, and afterwards, Richard gave me a Twitter follow, and we talked a little bit about journalism. He gave me a little bit of direction, and within 6 months of doing that, we were actually working together because I had been recruited to come join the Daily Dot. So, Richard, part of this conversation, and look, not to beat around the bush, I know Richard's a controversial figure in air quotes.
Yeah, right.
I know that
Doesn't
people.
take much.
I know that people have strong opinions about Richard in a lot of different ways. But nonetheless, I've gotten to know Richard Lewis, the person, over my career. And I think that I want to talk about that, the human being that does the work, the things that you guys probably don't frequently see when you're watching his Twitch streams or reading his work at Dexerto or, seeing him on the Four Horsemen or whatever it might be. So that's what I want to do here.
Yeah, and it's strange, because it flared up again. They probably saw there was a couple of crazies in the, in the replies, and it's like I can never pin anyone down on what it is that I'm supposed to have done or said or believe that's so outrageous compared to everybody else. One guy is saying it was wrong of me to reply to him insulting my work 7 years ago, because some of the people saw his tweet and said he was, wrong. So that was bad of me. Apparently, that was bad. That's something you have to bitterly hold on to for 7 years. And another person said, I got compared to Kanye West. which is
Yeah.
a first for me.
I did
Saying
see.
that,
I didn't bother to engage, but I did see someone
yeah,
who was like saying that because we were on this podcast together, that there would be like inward spam in the chat, and I was just like,
yeah. It's
I
like,
don't think people like. I was like, if somebody scrolls my Twitter, I am extremely progressive. I don't think you're gonna be getting that out of me. I don't know where that came from, but
you know,
yeah,
I think you're a bleeding heart lefty, right? So
yeah.
you know,
I mean, I much more than what I grew up around, but yeah, that,
and I'm you know,
whatever.
and I'm obviously like, you know, British Socialist Workers Party, like mining family. So I never get it, man. I hear all the time that I'm an American conservative and all this other, you know, nonsense. But I think it's just basically if you don't like someone's vibe, what people do on the internet these days is you don't do any research. You just craft an avatar of who the person's meant to be, and then you hate that 100%. You hate that version of whoever it is, and it just makes the internet really easy to navigate if you don't have to imagine people being, you know, three-dimensional human beings who might occasionally disagree with you, but might, you know, the rest of the time be, you know, helping old ladies across the road, or you know, like working for charities or doing all this other stuff. People don't like to try and think too much about it. So yeah, I get called controversial all the time, and it's always something that makes me really laugh, because I doubt you could find a single contentious, like truly contentious opinion I actually hold. I think I'm pretty vanilla, actually.
I think the biggest thing is people group lump, right? In the sense that, like, you know, you have an affiliation with and do work with various different people in the scene who are different than you. You are not a clone of Thorin, and
No.
things that Duncan say are not necessarily reflective of you in any type of way, you know, and you and I have worked together, so people lumping me in with whatever they think that image is, etc. Like, it's hard, and especially, and I think I was really proud of Prem Thotamkar from my team, who tweeted like, what is journalism, like being able to have people talk about their perspectives and give really deep nuance. And I think that's like what we're trying to do with this show. It's part of why I wanted to have you on too, is because being able to kind of dive deeper into that nuance, because like you and I don't have to agree on every single thing, but that doesn't, one, it doesn't discredit the work that you've done over your career. Two, it doesn't discredit the power that you hold in the position that you are in this industry. And two and three, like, you know, it certainly doesn't it doesn't mean that one part of you that people may dislike is certainly indicative of everything else you do in your life, as you mentioned. So
Yeah,
exactly, like,
and that's like just a general, again, that's the way the internet's trended. Like, it's like this concept, I was talking about this the other day, funnily enough. It's like the concept of going mask off. And what that really is it's permission for the person that ascribes that to somebody to basically say your worst moment, the moment you lost your temper, the moment you made a bad joke, the moment you said something inappropriate, the moment you tripped over your words, whatever it is, that one moment is actually the real you and will always be the real you for the end of time. And all the other stuff, all the stuff we liked, all the stuff that was good, all of that was the illusion. You were actually deceiving everyone the whole time. And this one little moment, that's who you are forever. And you're never allowed to forget about it. And every time somebody new discovers you, somebody can't wait to point it out. And then you've got to apologize for it all over again. If you don't keep endlessly apologizing, then people are going to say, well, you didn't disavow. It's like, I apologized for it 100 times 10 years ago. And that's just how you have to live now. And you know, it's like, I have always prided myself, like going back to even pre like esports and being a curious journalist and a writer. I always wanted to hang out with people that were from different, because when you grow up in a small town, you know, like, and I'm sure you can identify with this a little bit, and it's just not like, it's just who you are, and who you are lives next door to you, and the house after that, and the house after that, and
yep.
you just meet people like you from the same background, in the same economic strata, and you know, same religion, you know, whatever it is. And there's just not a lot of variety. There's not a lot of diversity, right? And so I grew up like that. And then when I got a chance to like break out from that, you know, I was very fortunate. I had like an Indian godmother, so I was exposed to Indian culture very young. You know, and I grew up in a place where there was like, again, a lot of racism, a lot of soul feeling coming out of the 70s and the 80s, when, you know, we had like unemployment, and then, we had Thatcher's government, and so there was a lot of that. But for me, I never fell into that trap because I had this anchor to understanding. There was outside perspectives, outside cultures, and then when I went to university, that was when I really wanted to get to know different people as much as possible. Like I like never. So the idea that we can't do that now, like the idea that we're sort of like falling back into, hey, we're the progressive tribe over here, and we don't talk to you because you believe that. It sucks. It sucks because even 10 years ago, we could all get around a table, have a few beers, have a shouting match, and then just sort of forget about it and brush it off. Americans used to be like America, especially. Americans used to be, neighbors and friends with differences, and now they legitimately do despise each other, and it's sad to see.
Yeah, it's internet tribalism ultimately, right? And I identify a lot with what you're saying. Like, I'm a very different person than what I grew up around. I don't particularly feel welcome in my hometown. I just got back from Atlanta today, and like I grew up with kids who'd like drape the Confederate flag into their back windows of their pickup trucks that they would drive to school, and it's just like, yeah, no, I'm not about that, and never was. And got in trouble for vernacular that I used as a teenager on the internet that I didn't mean, nor did I mean it hatefully. And super apologetic for that, and I always have been. But nonetheless, like
but you see the point, right? Like even something you did as a kid, you're not allowed to forget about it. You're not allowed to grow. I have discovered your nasty little secret, and you're never allowed to grow and never allowed to move on. And it's just an awful way to treat people. And on the point about Thorin, me and him, like I've never really, like we do have a lot of very differing opinions on lots of topics, in and outside of esports. But I don't think people will ever truly understand like who he is and how much the constant like being in a spotlight and being attacked is ultimately like you hit a certain point where you're just like, you know what, like if I cannot possibly win, if everything I say is going to be reviewed in the least charitable light possible at every time, if people are going to proactively lie and misrepresent things I've said, why would I ever extend the olive branch? And I understand it. Like it's not a point I've got to, but I've never had it as bad. Like I've had it bad. I've seen him get dogpiled on Twitter in ways that is like truly like actually shocking to me that it got that bad. I've maybe had it like once or twice in my life. I feel like Duncan gets it like every 3 to 6 months, and now I think probably a little part of him almost relishes it and just courts the attention, right?
Well, I feel like the reason the two people identify you to be quite similar, even if not sort of behind the scenes for the people that know you, is that you're both incredibly defensive on Twitter, and some of that I think is probably warranted, and some of it is probably not, right? Like I think warranted in the sense that when someone comes at you, and I want to get it in this topic at some point throughout this podcast, like the esports talk video from last year, where they're sort of pulling back something that happened to you traumatic in your life, losing a close friend. I would argue almost your daughter in the sense of the way that you cared for Maria. Which we'll dive into. I'll have to explain because some of our audience is not familiar with you or the backstory there. But in a sense like that, totally, I understand the defensive like gag reflex to immediately be like that, right, and just go and go on the crusade and take care of it. But sometimes I have seen you get defensive at small things that somebody says something and they didn't mean it, or they're just messing around with you or whatever, and that sort of that same gag reflex comes out and it's just like hyper defensive. And I think I can understand that like that can come from like a place of hurt, and also just like that constant, right, that the gag reflex is built over time after experiencing it over and over and over again. Sometimes it's triggered warrantedly, sometimes not.
Yeah, and so in that regard, it's like it's really hard to sort of just get used to just being like sort of just verbally, I guess, abused every day. Like it's just never a position I've been in until I achieved like a sort of degree of notoriety in esports, and then it's just been a daily thing that like escalated to out and out insanity, like working at E-League and having people like convicted felons say they're going to come and shoot me, and having to have a bodyguard, and like it's madness. I just talk about video games essentially. And so, it's kind of hard to let stuff go. Although I would certainly say, like, if you look at Twitter this year, if I do it, it's probably like very rare. I don't. There is no point in engaging, honestly, because you're never going to change anybody's mind about who you are. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. You're just stuck with it. You are stuck having to. Like, you can't even block people on Twitter. I mean, that's the other thing I found out that's fascinating to me. There is, like, the anonymous people on Twitter have set up a set of rules that, like, personalities and public figures sort of have to live by, that puts, like, stacks the deck totally in their favor. I can't retaliate, I can't react, I can't quote tweet, I can't DM, and I can't block. So what I have to do is, I'm allowed to mute you, but if you find out, you get to call me names and create a burner account and start the process over again. So generally, if you're a public figure on Twitter, it is like being put in the stocks in medieval times, and you are just expected to take being pelted with rotting fruit all day. And I just never understood that. And so now I understand it. Now I get it. Now I get it. I accept it. Fine. I guess you just get to do that to me every day of my life. Fine. Whatever. It's okay. It's like, there's worse things. Like, so, but for years I used to push back on it, because it's like, all right, we'll see who. It used to be a little point of pride. Like, we'll see who snaps first. You want to insult me? I'm going to insult you with a much louder megaphone. Let's see how you like it. Let's see which one of us loses the game of chicken. And I used to love it if somebody, like, deleted an account or whatever. That's like victory. Get a beer, celebrate that one. Which is, probably childish and weird, but there's a, I have a certain tenacious quality, I guess, which is essential to the type of work I do, and essential to how I got to be where I was, coming from a background, with a father in prison and a, single mother, and growing up in one of the poorest estates in Britain. So, it's like, it does. I think overall, I think it's a positive quality. But can you have positive qualities that don't always get applied in positive ways? Absolutely. So, I think it's reflective of that.
Yeah, I think the biggest argument is like, if we call that a sword fight, you versus the random anonymous account, your sword has barbs and fire on it, in the sense that, like, it comes with all the other people who are paying attention to what you're doing, whereas, like, random Twitter account has none of that. And I think the balance, because I started being the same way, and I don't know if you remember saying this to me. You said to me really early in my career, had to be like 2015, our year working together. You were like, every single Twitter argument comes with followers and engagement, something to that effect. And I was just like, I bought into that a lot at first, and then I got to ESPN and got hand slapped for it a handful of times, and I was just like, yeah, it's not worth it. Like, at the same time, like, let the work speak for itself. Continue. I had a moment of breaking a story about a League of Legends team in 2016 that was disbanding during the World Championship, and
remember that.
And I had a month of just, like, again, flurry of awful people, Korean fans who wanted me dead, and among other things. And I was just like, you know what? Like, it almost did the inbound. I just shut up. I didn't even try to, like, come back after it, mostly because I was afraid of losing my job and ESPN getting pissed that I was doing it. But I was just like, all right, whatever. I got vindicated. The story became true as I had reported, and it almost had the rebounding effect. It's like people, like, took me way more seriously that I got that, like, very, very kind of under wraps thing accurate, versus, people thinking like, oh, this guy's an asshole that's just going to, like, fight and send a bunch of people at it. And it's hard to balance. I've found being able to, I don't know who most of my 80,000+ followers are. I don't know what the hell they're going to do to people. Like, I can't, it's hard to, like, yes, I'm in control of that, but I don't know what I'm in control of, if that makes sense. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I'll never accept responsibility for someone else's actions. Like, I'm not going, like, we keep moving the dial on this. And, it's like me tweeting, calling someone an asshole, and then a bunch of other people who follow me doing the same thing. That being compared to, like, stochastic terrorism is frankly absurd. And yet that is certainly, like, where very recently the discussions have taken us to. And so I'm just of the opinion like this. Like, if I want to express an opinion, I definitely think it's my right to do so. If you want to engage me in a conversation apropos of nothing, very often, if you don't like where that goes, like I'm a you respect me, I'll respect you back. You make a point, I'll answer it. But I it's very hard for me because I'm pre-internet. I'm an old man, so it's very hard for me to understand like why somebody can just tweet vitriolic abuse at you, and that's fine, and that's actually your job to accept it. But if they said that face to face, like, people would consider it provocation. So, but it's not on the internet, but it is in real life, but it's not on the internet. So it's just like it's been a learning process, like, for me, and like I say, I've just arrived at the point now where it's like I just don't really give a shit. It's like, I like I say, I guess people do just get to do that to public figures, and if I'm gonna be one, I'm just going to have to accept it. There's no point in saying it's not fair. There's no point in saying it shouldn't be like this way. It's no point in pointing out how stacked the deck is in the favor of anonymous accounts that get to do it. Because obviously, I'm a big believer in your right to anonymity on the internet. It's essential for whistleblowers, and I'm a journalist, so I can't exactly. I've seen some celebrities go, "Yeah, no anonymous account should be allowed on social media." It's like, no, don't sign me up for that. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I get, and with age as well, and life kicks the shit out of you, you just start to realize like what's important and what isn't. And certainly, winning a Twitter argument with Elite Sniper Wolf 42 is not. You know what I mean?
It's not the badge of honor you want to carry in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not going on the shelf, is it? It's not going next to the awards or whatever. So yeah, it's just act my age, I guess. I'm getting there.
So we start at that sort of free flu. I want to dial back a little bit because I want to talk about sort of I want to go through a little bits of your life, especially over the past 6-7 years that I've known you, and I want to talk first about sort of our time working at the Daily Dot, and I want to talk about the Reddit ban and some of the other things that happened during that period of time. And you'll kind of see where I'm going with this, and we'll keep moving through kind of what's happened in the 7 years since. So for those kind of unfamiliar, especially maybe the audio on demand audience who aren't familiar with you, and maybe they're from tech and business, et cetera, and more broadly, in 2015, Richard was working at a publication called The Daily Dot. I joined about a quarter away into the year as well, and there was there were allegations of more or less like hate brigading, I think is the word they used. Yeah. That you were somehow.
Well, they just out and out lied in the end and did say vote brigading, but yeah, it was hate brigading was used at some point.
Yeah, so Richard would report many big League of Legends stories. There would be people in the comments that would say something. Richard would outlink to those on Twitter or other places. A bunch of people that followed Richard would sort of swarm and say whatever they had to say. This is part of what we've been talking about here for the past 10 minutes or so anyway. And eventually Richard and his content, all of his content, including breaking stories that were extremely important to that specific scene, League of Legends, were banned off of the League of Legends subreddit. And I want to ask you, I won't even make this a leading question. How do you felt that your employer at the time, the Daily Dot, handled that?
You know what? Like, I mean, because it was all mostly done through Kevin. Like, I mean, right. And, we've seen a lot of media companies go under recently. And as an esports media company or any media company, the monetization, the revenue model is garbage, So it's like you can go under at any time, and Reddit was a huge traffic driver. And I was like the number one writer for the League of Legends stories at the time. There's like, you were the guy coming up. And so, between the staff writers that we had there, well, we had League of Legends on lockdown, right? Like, I mean, we broke pretty much between us, like, I want to say almost every big story, like, and not just that. I mean, like, it was just a little bit prior to that when we both ended up at the Dot. We started, the whole concept of the Rostermania moves and treating it like ESPN Sports Center and transfer deadline day, trade deadline day. Like we're like that, like all of our work, the two of us, you know, and obviously Josh Raven, who I don't even know what Josh is doing these days, but like that's why we're at where it is now. That's how years later we get to a wolf bomb. So the traffic we used to get off this was insane, right? And so the mods banning it was petulant, petty, pathetic. I'd put myself in this situation with my own hard headedness, and it would have just been easy. Like it just shouldn't happen. I just shouldn't have been doing it. In reality, even though I probably would have quit at the time because I was an asshole. Someone at the Daily Dot probably should have told me to stop doing it. I don't know, maybe not to pass the buck, but just to point out, like, it was only going to go one way. Unfortunately, Reddit being a massive platform where anonymous volunteer staff are pretty much in charge because it's too big and cumbersome to have an actual working moderation team that's salaried. Is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for anyone that's reliant on traffic models, because all you have to do is annoy one moderator, and it turns out that moderator mods 280 subreddits. You can be you and your content can be banned from all of them. Like, you can just be essentially like disappeared. So I put myself in this like really stupid situation where I couldn't really win. It was like, like looking back, which isn't to excuse their actions. I mean, they're just awful people. But I jeopardized the publication with my bullshit, and so
to be fair, we didn't get the kiss of death that On Gamers got. For those kind of unfamiliar, there was a competing website called On Gamers, who kind of people that went through their ship would be. I remember Slasher was one of the biggest people on that platform, but Travis Gafford, Thorin worked there at a period of time as well. They were kind of the other competitor. They were a subsection of CBS Interactive, and sort of what they were doing. It was a part of GameSpot, the other website that CBS Interactive owned at the time. It was the esports subsection of that. And for those unfamiliar, that entire website was banned off of all of Reddit. They got the extreme kiss of death, where they couldn't go anywhere.
The staff, the actual red names, discovered that stuff. So
yeah, they were more or less like messaging people to submit their content and vote brigading in staff chats, etc. And all of their content got banned. In our case, it was Richard got banned, and everybody else was all right. Like the rest of the site was okay.
So it put us in a weird spot, because we had conversations about, like, would I be willing to farm out stories and have a different byline, which I refused. I was definitely right to refuse that, because that's,
you did the right thing.
That's unethical. But it got crazy, dude. Like, I mean, you remember, like, Reddit moderators wrote a hostage letter to the Daily Dot, basically with a list of demands. Like, no joke, this really happened. Reddit moderators wrote a list of 4 demands, and they said they would unban me in 6 months if I agreed to all of them. And this stuff was including, like, he will never tweet or talk about us on any other social media. But it was insane. So obviously we couldn't agree to that either, and that's just how that went down. But I mean, look, I think, like, with the benefit of hindsight, I don't hate the way that the Daily Dot probably should have shit canned me. They certainly could have, and they didn't. And I got to work there for a lot longer until we had another incident, which was a different editor from a different section. So I don't hate the way they handled it. I hate the way I handled it. I hate the way Reddit works. I hate the way traffic, is such a big, factor in what we do. So, yeah, all in all, it was a very childish affair on probably all sides. But I'm the guy that lit the torch paper, so.
And ultimately, you did resign. And we did not know this at the time. I found out kind of before the rest of the staff, because you came to Atlanta, was that you were being courted by your agent, who was simultaneously also helping build Turner's E-League offering and build up the original E-League broadcasting crew. And you were sort of poised to be the main host of that, even before it really existed. And so, I remember you coming to Atlanta, us going to dinner, and you certainly were, like, super frustrated with this stuff at the time, understandably so. But that, you decided to leave, and and I want to talk about this more broadly because the intermediate there, your contract with Turner wasn't like fully active. You weren't moved out to Atlanta, et cetera, for probably a period of about 7 months in between your resignation and actually starting to do some of that work at the beginning of 2016. And in the aughts, you freelanced for Breitbart, which is it's a thing that many people bring up as a stain on your career now. Even though I do know that you wrote some political things, but certainly not as wacky as maybe some of the other hard, aggressive American conservative stuff that's on that website. And certainly, but the bulk of your work was gaming and esports work on that website. But that 8 months or however long you did there is the one thing that people bring up constantly. All the time.
It was and that all happened. So I had an issue at the Daily Dot, and they had censored they had edited my copy to say things I didn't write, which it's got my name on it. This cannot be allowed, and they were inserting in the edits things I didn't believe. Like things I didn't believe politically, things I didn't believe were an accurate reflection of events because the editor believed these things. No.
Yeah, to be fair, I do want to just preface when I went to New York that summer to visit some of the New York staff, and I remember, and this was my first election. I had just turned 28, or I just turned 18, and was going to be voting in 2016, and I just wanted to watch a Trump debate. I ended up voting for a third party in that election because I didn't like either side of the thing.
Yeah, right.
Ultimately, it's just a 2016 little election was a mess, but I just wanted to watch a debate and just hear what someone had to say. That was it. I didn't end up supporting either side in the end, but I remember saying that in that office, and everybody was like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I was just okay.
And like I said, because ostensibly I am a lefty, right? Like I was at the Dot for years, like it was close to 2 years. So it was but there was this like gradual erosion where it was like politics in a newsroom. It's always a tricky thing to juggle, but the bottom line is, your personal political opinions shouldn't inform copy, and it certainly, as an editor, shouldn't make you put things that aren't an accurate reflection of reality into copy because you want to make a point and you don't think the writer made this point. And that happened, and that to me was like the last straw. I argued with the editor about it. I said, I don't want you inserting your political views into my copy and put my name on it. I don't. It's unforgivable what you're doing. And so anyway, this was at a time when, again, things were a little bit more, because nobody believed Trump could win. Nobody really things weren't as tribal because everyone thought it was all going to be okay. Hillary was going to get her turn. Trump was just going to be like this weird little aberration. Like, it only really got heated after he won the election. I mean, it was still a bit crazy in 2015, 2016. Like the tribalism and stuff and the division, but it got really crazy after he won. And so, I was basically, like looking for a job, and I knew a guy from like the UK media set, Milo Yiannopoulos, because people don't realize he built like I think he built was it the Kernel? Anyway, he sold the website to the Daily Dot. And so I think he heard through the grapevine that I got shit canned, or that I quit, and that he hit me up and like out of the blue. And I knew this guy because, like I say, I follow media stuff, it's the reason I knew, Jillian being from TMZ when she turned up in esports working at TSM, I always thought I would go and do something a bit more important than this. And anyway, so he hit me up out of the blue. I just got a phone call from him, and he said, listen, this happens all the time with these publications. Breitbart's got this new gaming vertical coming out. It's completely separately funded. We're gonna be on an island of misfits on our own, doing our own stuff, and no one's going to interfere, and we'll never censor you, and we'll never change your copy, and blah blah. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. And I said, chances are I can only do it for a year anyway, maybe less. And so I went down. I had my job interview with him. The job interview was him making me put on a "Make America Great Again" baseball cap, taking a photo of it, and saying, "Now you can't leave because I'll leak this." That was the job interview. That was how working at Breitbart. There's just so many crazy stories that people wouldn't even believe. So, and like, he's joking around, but also, yeah, that happened. So anyway, so I ended up joining them, and they got like Alan Bakari, by the way, is like a fantastic reporter, and he was essentially Milo's ghostwriter. It later came out. So I just thought I was hanging around with like the naughty table, the edgelords, and I was like, I'm all right with that, But obviously, subsequent stories, I stopped talking to Milo when I saw him associating with actual Nazis, like actual neo Nazis, and it was just like that. That's a line. Yeah, I can't tolerate that. I can't have you in my friendship circle. Like when my family, my background, like it's just it's impossible. It's fundamentally incompatible. So but like that period of time, there was a pressure to start writing more political stuff. I think they were grooming me not to. I think they used to hate it when I broke an esports story. I think because we had talks at the time about maybe doing a political radio show together, me and Milo. It was going to be called Milo and Dick, right? I think they were grooming me to do political stuff, and there was a pressure there. And what I noticed was towards the end was that they did the thing they promised they wouldn't. Change the copy, made it a bit more right wing, made it a bit more, I added this line because this was topical and this was trending, and I'm like, well, I didn't write that, but all right. So, both sides of the political aisle, both the same nonsense, and I said it. I said for years that like I was never gonna like, I took a job. People do bring it up all the time, and they try and beat me around the head with it. It's not like I wrote anything outrageous. It's not like I wrote anything, but there was. I'll be honest. I regret going there. I wish I hadn't. I wish I could take it back. If I could have seen the bigger picture, I certainly wouldn't have joined. You have to understand, for a British person in like 2015, like I still remembered Breitbart from Andrew Breitbart. Steve Bannon's Breitbart was it was and is a very different beast. So and I didn't know that going in. So yeah, it's just people are right to bring it up. I think it's a stain. It's fine. But I it's not as bad as what people made out. I certainly did not go along for the fucking Marga ride or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like they bludgeon you with it in the sense of like that you were there for act like you were there for X number of years and for went through the entire election. You left before the election, even actually. Like you
I was working at Turner when the election happened.
Yeah, you were full-time E-League, so you're on American television doing something completely unrelated. So it's I always find it interesting when it comes up because it comes up every single time you do anything. So let's talk Turner briefly. I think most people can go find all the VODs of you doing E-League, and I think that's really the biggest thing. I do remember while we were talking about sort of defense on Twitter, I do remember you getting a couple different talking tos on that more broadly because they were hypersensitive to that sort of stuff. And I think that they also, a lot of the people that worked at Turner are highly beloved for the most part anyway, right? You think about the NBA set that they have, one of the best shows on American television, and, those people are like generally very likable. Mm-hmm. A little bit different for the people that they hired in the esports side of things, right? Like even back then when the scene was much smaller, there was a lot of vitriol around not just you, not just Thorin, just some of the others as well. So yeah, I don't know. It felt like they were not particularly they did one thing but weren't necessarily aware of kind of what else was out there. So
yeah, and I'd had a bunch of drama. So I mean, essentially, I don't think Turner really wanted me. I think my agent just did such a good job of pushing me into that. I never worked on TV. You've got this like, chubby balding guy. It's like it's like being the fucking Brian Stelter of esports or something. And he's worked at Breitbart as well. Fantastic. For a Turner company that owns CNN. And there was the load of drama as well. Literally just happened before I took the job. So I don't think they wanted me. And also in our first meeting that we had about it, we were talking about some topics or whatever, and I just said I don't have a dog in the fight. And the vice president of the network said, "You're meant to be auditioning for a job. What the fuck do you mean you don't have a dog in the fight?" And I was like, because I just was so almost indifferent to it. What was weird was it felt going into that job like this is just another gig, because the hosting was always the side gig and the journalism was always the main thing. And Turner was saying, you've got to stop your YouTube videos. You've got to stop breaking stories. You can't write a blog. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just won't take the TV job. It's fine. I don't need it. People think I got an ego, and I do, but they just don't understand the way my ego is wired. I don't need the spotlight. I don't need the attention. My ego comes from the work I do. Like, by the time it goes out, I am proud of it. And so if you attack the work, that is the one thing that will always be like, I'm not talking about criticizing, I'm talking about attacking. If somebody says, he's lied, or that's not true, or you've put misinformation in it, no, I'm not going to tolerate it, because I know I wouldn't do those things. And my record speaks for itself on that front. So they want to strip me of all of that, saying, you won't have time. You're going to be on TV. You're going to be doing this. And so I fought in all of these meetings tooth and nail to keep the YouTube channel, to be allowed to write a blog, to be allowed to break stories. I probably broke some of my biggest stories while I worked at Turner, and I'm sure they hated it every time. The Phantom Lord thing.
Yep.
That was while I was at Turner. I am sure they hated it. But, it was just like, I wish I could have known about how good the job was going to be at the start. I might have given up a little bit. I might have focused on it a little bit more. 2016 to 2018, even with the stress, even with the death threats, even with the bodyguards, working for Turner is the high. Like, it was the best. E-League, great people, wonderful people. A network where I got to work alongside wonderful people and got to see how wonderful people work, like, EJ and stuff like that. Like, I wish I could go back there. Like, if I could just visit a memory. Like, if I was on Star Trek and that was the holodeck, that's what I'm going back to. I had everything I wanted. I had people who cared about me, around me. I was on TV. Esports was blowing up in a good way, not like now. The money was relatively clean. Things were positive. It was just, and people, for the first time in my esports life, people had backed me, like they'd actually backed me. All of the drama, all the bad stuff, I got backed, and I got chosen. And a few weeks in, people respected my work. Everyone at that network said, "You're good." I had EJ himself come to me and say, "Listen, like you could do this for real, like for proper on like a sports show. Just keep working, keep here. Here's some pointers. Do this, do that. Hit me up anytime you want." And I wonder how different my life would have been if I hadn't left, because I realistically left over money and family, and I was in a weird spot. So I sort of do miss it. I know E-League isn't even there now, but I had so many friends at the network. I'm sure they would have found something for me to do. And honestly, I miss getting up and going into that, office and walking past the wall. We see all the great TV shows, all the historic moments in the Turner Network's history as you come in on that mural, and just sitting down in that, green room with a cup of coffee and talking to all the crew. It's like, sad how it sort of ended, but there was some high points for sure. That was a hell of a time.
Yeah, having worked at ESPN, it was always very envious of that, the group of people, not necessarily the work, but the group of people. Like Craig Sager and Ernie Johnson's books are on the bookshelf behind me. And, EJ is as humble as you're saying, because I've emailed him and have gotten several different responses in like conversation, right?
Guy's
like,
a class act. Just one of the nicest
exactly.
dudes. Like, it's not fake. It's not nonsense. No.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar, we're talking about the basketball broadcaster Ernie Johnson, who is incredibly humble and just a great family person, broadcaster. He hosts it Inside the NBA. And Craig Sager, who was the interview host for that show, and he passed away from cancer some time ago as well.
That was the toughest day at work, because I obviously didn't know the guy, and I'd not met him, and I'd only been exposed very like limited to his work. And when he passed, everyone was obviously like devastated, and we had an E-League tape in, and so I had to do the obituary. And I was like, man, like that was like out of all the things I'd done, that's like the most pressure. Like, you have to read. I'd read like an obituary that had been written by one of his like colleagues who knew him, and do it justice. at a network where everyone was like devastated. That was like the toughest show we ever did. But that's like what it was like working at Turner, right? The hardest show we ever did was because everyone was so sad because somebody died and everybody knew them. You know, from the like cameramen crying, you know, floor manager crying, like everybody devastated. And so, there was some. I know you hear a lot of this like family nonsense when you talk about businesses and where people work. Like, I wish I could have put a bit more time into that family. Looking back, I definitely regret that I didn't try harder to be a bigger part of Turner. I think.
Yeah, they really are special. I mean, for the audience, like for you to understand how meaningful Turner took care of its talent, has taken care of its talent. Ernie Johnson's also had his battles with cancer, and they've given him a significant amount of time off to go deal with that, supported him and his family. He also has a special needs son who passed away some time ago as well, within the past year, and who he had adopted from, I believe, from Europe. And, it's that entire company got to the point where, like, Craig Sager's last year on this earth was sort of shepherded by the fact that that Turner and ESPN worked together for him to do his first ever NBA finals, because ESPN had exclusive rights in America to the NBA finals, and he was a lifelong Turner talent, and they had him in an exclusive contract to be on their network, and the two worked together for him to be on camera and be the interview host at the NBA finals. And I think that was the LeBron James 2016 year NBA finals as well, which is magical in its own special way.
Yeah, that was a hell of a time, man.
Yeah, different. So, you ultimately ended up leaving, and you went to go do the World Series of Esports. Feels like that was very much a blip on the radar. More broadly, that time went by really quickly.
Listen, I don't mind saying it. Like, again, it was good people, but it was a money job. I was in a weird spot. Like, I just had my contract renegotiations with Turner. I was getting a pay bump, but I'd also had, and it's like, dude, I never thought I'd be earning a 6-figure salary ever in my life. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I used to work on a farm, So it was a really good offer, great package, all the benefits of being at Turner, all the people, right? They want another 2 years there, that network. But the problem was, I wasn't in a very good headspace because I had, I'd had 3 events now where particular communities in the competitive gaming space who don't like me, every time I was hosting one of their games, they would send in all this like outrageous stuff. Like, they would lie and say I was anti-Semitic to managers that they knew were Jewish, and they would call me a racist, call me a Nazi. They would threaten to kill me. We couldn't do fan meetups. We had to put on extra security when we did the tape-ins. It was insane, and it wasn't just once. It was like 3. Like, there was a period where it was like in Atlanta there was another event like the week after like E-League, and so we'd done E-League with one game, and then there was an event for the same game in Atlanta, and I'd just done with the same crew that were going to work that event, the broadcast talent. And so they were like, "Oh, you should come to that. It'll be good. Like, if people see you there, then they'll get a better understanding of who you are, and they'll ingratiate you to them." So I was like, "Yeah, actually, good idea." And then basically, someone sent in like it was them like cocking a shotgun and saying, "If I see you, if I see you in Atlanta, I will kill you, like on site." And then we found out that was like that guy had some convictions. And that was the second time someone with a conviction had said they were going to kill me. And then so the security at Turner said, "Don't go," right? Because we can't guarantee your safety off site or at other events. And then all the broadcast talent as well said, like, "Just don't come. Actually, fuck this." and they wouldn't even meet me for lunch after. They were like, "If we're seen with you, we're in trouble." So I was like, all right. So I'd had all of these things happen and a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, well, I like, it ruins it for me. And I asked Turner, I said, like, I know I brought all the FGC stuff to like your attention and like said like we should do it, but like I can't do. Are we going to do extra seasons? Because I can't deal with this stress. And they said, look, we'll work something out. It won't be as bad, but yeah, we are going to do the games again. So I had that in the back of my mind. I had my contract negotiations, and then I went out and was partying one night, and somebody said, listen, I'm doing a startup. It'll be this, it'll be this, it'll be that. And I said, oh, sounds cool, you know? And he said, like, you'd never leave Turner, though, would you? And I was like, nah, probably not. And he said, like, not even for, like, double the salary. And I said, dude, I don't think you know what I make. And he said, it doesn't matter. And they said, listen, we're all drinking. We'll just leave it there. So I called him up, and I'm like, was any of that real? Like, oh, what are we doing? And they said, yeah, like, of course, it's real. Like, come and get it. So I took a job where it was like I'm making close to $250,000 a year to be a host of a esports startup, you know. And it's like that. How can I say no to that? And the thing was, Maria, who I was living with at the time, I already mentioned, she had a bunch of like legacy medical bills. She had a bunch of surgeries she needed to get to improve her quality of life. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, right? So I combine the two in my mind and I say, fuck it, I'm going to take the plunge, man. Seems to be the right idea. Move to Vegas, go to a startup, build something up for yourself, make a bunch of money doing it, and I can finally afford to give Maria the quality of life that I want to give her. So did that. And yeah, I mean, you know, it was a disaster. It was like, it was all smoke and mirrors. I think the events we did were great. Like, understand that. But in terms of monetization, in terms of workflow, in terms of some of the hires we made, some of it was shocking. And, you know, there were good people at that company too, but there were a lot of bad actors and a lot of lazy people and incompetent people, unfortunately. So, and they know who they are because some of them have failed upwards since. So, yeah, that was like, it was a blip. It was an aberration. You know, but it was, I combined everything that was going on in my life at the time, and I thought it was the right decision to make.
I want to talk about Maria. And I want to talk about your involvement, and what happened, and then I want to talk about the esports stuff, without triggering tears as much as possible.
It's okay.
That's okay if that happens.
Yeah, I'm good.
But yeah, so for those unfamiliar, in 2015 or 2016, there was a trans woman player, Maria, went by Ramelia, who was League of Legends' first ever female professional athlete. She made it to the LCS, competed in the LCS, and had a relationship. And Richard, you correct me here if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to get the most out of my brain details here from reporting on this. She was recruited to the team Renegades, who had been in the Challenger Series and qualified in. She qualified in with the team as the support player of the team, and had built sort of a paternal type relationship with one of the owners of that team, a man by the name of Chris Badawi, who was extremely accepting of who she was at a time in her life when many people were not. And at one point offered and did take her to Asia to have a series of various different surgeries that resulted in significant health complications afterwards as well. And then it turns out that there was this massive scandal around the Renegades team, for a various of different reasons, including some threats regarding that favor and gift done to Maria, given to Ramelia, that trip to Asia and those surgeries, as well as some other allegations of drugs being passed around the house, the Renegade's house. And ultimately, in May of 2016, Riot decided that they were going to ban Renegades from the LCS, and that they were going to permanently ban Chris Badawi from being a part of anything League of Legends related. Ultimately, he did try again, for what it's worth, in Asia. But nonetheless, this massive sort of issue. And for once, I remember finding Richard Lewis and Riot Games on the same side of an issue, which was very surprising to me. But the more I learned, I kind of understood why you were doing so. But in the wake of this entire meltdown around this team, you took Maria in and, became very close friends, became roommates for a extended period of time. Let's kind of start there, your participation with Riot and talking to Riot through this, because that, you know, you are notably very adversarial to Riot Games in a lot of different ways, but in this particular instance, you were a part of their investigation. So walk me through kind of that.
So yeah, obviously, like, I mean, I don't know, man. Esports is just weird, right? It's just a grimy scene. So, you know, Chris, who I'd got to know after there was another story, because if you remember when he first came into the league, all the other owners kind of got together, like bandied together to try and like push him out, because they thought he had Martin Shkreli funding him or something crazy. And so they were worried about him being able to outspend them because, you know, League of Legends, the team owners in North America just operate like a cartel. So they got they got basically a bunch of people to put some very like dubious statements out, let's say, through another mouthpiece. And Riot, and essentially Riot Games were banning him from going to the venue, you know, and all this other stuff. So I basically like covered that story and looked into the poaching allegations and all this other stuff that they'd said about him. And basically none of it held water. It was like he said,
it was like 2 out of the 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam Wingle and I spent that summer like fact checking it, and it was like
Exactly.
what C9 and Team Liquid said about him were true, and the other 6 people that said things about him were at best just not able to be proved, or at worst just straight up lies. Like, yeah,
so
exactly.
You know, it was like I met him when we were on the debunk trail, right? And so, you know, he seemed an affable guy, and he invited me out to the house, right? You know, he said, "Come out to the house, we'll hang out, we'll get a few beers." And I was like, "All right," you know, because like, listen, probably the one area, you know, like in esports journalism that definitely, I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to go and have a drink with that person. I don't know. I always thought it's okay though, but whatever. So we went to the house. We get in there, and immediately I sense something's off kilter. There's too many people in this house. It's like a 5-6 bedroom mansion, you know, but like there's like always 12 or 14 people around, and they're there in the mornings. So people are doubling up in rooms. People are sleeping on floors. You know, I'm like, all right. There's the chef. It was how he was introduced to me. He's an old friend of Chris Badawi's. He's telling me he's British and he's speaking with a really fake British accent. And it turned out he just had untreated mental health issues. And he was sleeping on the garage floor because Chris said he can't be trusted in the house. You know, so I'm like, right. I've been around weird shit. This is too weird. And so all the players are miserable. He's making them practice loads. And it was just like, I identified Maria straight away as somebody that was close to breaking point. She'd just come back from a real heavy surgery in Thailand, which by the way, she told the reason that went down the way it did is she said, if you're going to put like people bully me because I'm trans, I need the surgery to sort of feel good about myself because, you know, of what people say. And I don't think I can be in the spotlight, and I don't think I can be on a broadcast watched by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people if I don't feel comfortable. And she said, that's what I need from you if I'm to do this. I don't have to do this, but if that is provided, I will be your support player, and, you know, we can make this work. And so Chris made all the promises, said he would do it, said he would look into it, said he would do the research, and she ended up, you know, getting butchered essentially. So, and was in lifelong pain right up until the day she passed. So she was recovering physically at this time and being expected to play while she was still wearing all the aftercare stuff. And he is like, you know, like there's no support mechanism. He was pushing her into like photo shoots and all this other stuff, and there was no fun in the house, dude. Like, it wasn't a board game in the house. I remember I went out to the first time I pissed Chris off. I went out to like a Toys R Us or whatever, and I bought like just a bunch of stupid board games and toys to try and like lighten the mood. Right? Because everyone was just literally scrimming for like 10 hours a day with the coach watching them. The only time they took a break was to eat, and then after that they had to stream. Right, some of them had to stream, hit the sponsor numbers. So I came back with a bunch of toys and board games. I said, like, let's just goof off and play Twister or some dumb shit. And Chris went mentally, said, you're sabotaging my team. So by the time I realized as well, like he had the biggest room in the house to himself. And like he was living with the players, which is what I mean about esports just being weird. A team owner living with the players and the entourage and the shit all in one house. And everyone's aware of this, by the way. And there was multiple team houses like this just in esports. Yeah, it's not just them that were doing it. This is like not abnormal in North American esports at this time, which is terrifying to me because I just wonder how many other like abuses and God knows what else like slipped through the cracks, right? But anyway, like so, there's Adderall being doled out. He's saying like he is advocating for it. He is saying to people like, you should, like Adderall would improve your performance. Hey, do you know if you went to a doctor and said X, Y, and Z, they'll probably give you Adderall, right? I'm like hearing this and I'm like, this is dangerous now. This has gone beyond uncomfortable. This has gone beyond weird. This has gone beyond domineering. This is now dangerous. This is how you can hurt somebody doing this. Nah, enough's enough. So I left and I told at this point, Maria had a number of emotional episodes. She was self-harming. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing this. So I told her I would come back and I would get her out the house because she was the one that was the most at risk. And I told him I was going to do it. I flew home. I had to get some stuff in order, get some money together, think about what the next plan was. I had to step up the Turner stuff and where we're going to live and blah, blah. And basically, the riot investigations like came somewhere in all of this. I basically like flew back, he'd threatened to kick her out on the streets. He said she's not my player anymore because she said she couldn't do it anymore. He said, she's not my player anymore. I don't have to house her. I'm kicking her out. This is the deadline. And so we had to go and we went to another team house that wasn't being used at that time. I knew a friend and I called him up and I said, we got to go somewhere super quick. When we drove, funnily enough, it was in Vegas. And so we drove to another empty team house, just me and her. And that's where we just stayed. And then the riot investigation kicked in and they were like, listen, we wanted this guy out of the league since forever. And I went, yeah, well, it turns out it's actually worse than what you thought it was. It wasn't just poaching or whatever. Turns out this guy shouldn't be around young adults, in my professional opinion. So I did a bunch of interviews, talked to all their legal people and stuff. And it was just like, and obviously I'm not publishing any of this as a story because it would have been, again, an ethics violation. I couldn't write about it. I was like too involved, So... but yeah, I cooperated with the riot investigation all the way. I mean, like that situation is about as bad as I've seen it in the team house. I mean, certainly from Maria's perspective, but there's just like, by the time it gets to that stage, like, I mean, like realistically, like that person should never be allowed to own a team again. That's like genuinely how I feel about it. And I'm glad Riot did what they did. I'm actually thankful. Like, absolutely thankful. I hope they do it to, if there's ever another manager that operates in the same way, I hope they do it to them too. I hope they keep that standard.
I spent my basically entire summer investigating that situation and going through it all, and it was so touchy because it was just like, it's incredibly difficult dealing with sort of what ESPN could print, what couldn't. And I think, and this is feedback I've given to Riot all these years later, is like, and I think they've done at least a little bit better job of it. You look at like the Tainted Minds investigation they did in Oceania some years ago afterwards. And, I was like, you guys were just way too vague in what you said publicly. And, like to the point of like, you got to be direct. And I understand like you want to be super close to the vest legally. You don't want to like end up in a defamation suit against someone or whatever it may be. But like at the same time, like their statement was awful around the entire situation. How they handled it with the public was awful. And it led way too much open for interpretation. And I think that's where like where I stepped in was like trying to figure out like what the hell actually happened here in a statement that's basically a paragraph, killing millions of dollars in business value like that, right? Like, and that I think that was like, it was very hard to deal with that summer. And I think the other thing that was tough to deal with was the fact that the other business partner in the Renegades situation is Monte Cristo, is Chris, or Christopher. And Christopher very respected in our industry, and I think that a lot of the industry gave Christopher the benefit of the doubt, even if his other business partner Chris.
The only mistake he made was doing what loads of people did, and that was trusting Chris. And Chris was a very like affable person. He was like a very goofy kind of charm, very easy to like, very easy to talk to, and so and also like said all the right things. Like Chris was a player advocate. Incredibly, he wanted the players to unionize at a time when the other team owners didn't.
I remember that.
So obviously I warmed to him immediately, and it's understandable why Monty would have as well. But like I see lots of people say some pretty heinous and vile shit about Monty. To make it absolutely clear, like Maria and Monty were on friendship terms before she passed. Like there was no ill feeling between them whatsoever. There was no ill feeling between him and me whatsoever. And a lot of people like grotesquely exaggerate his involvement because they don't know the facts. Like Monty wasn't even in the country when this was going on. He'd never even been to the team house. He was in South Korea casting all the OGN games. So, he catches strays from this now always like makes me sad a little bit. It's not fair.
Yeah. It's I would agree with that stance as a independent reporter in this particular scenario with no emotional ties. I would say, if anything, it was just negligence. He let Chris Badali kind of do whatever he wanted to do, and some of that was pretty awful.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's like there was no like Chris wasn't reporting any of this shit to anyone or saying that he was doing any of this stuff. It's like he was just a one-man band, like just running this team and being around all these young adults. And what I realized, just to kind of put a pin in the topic was what really scared me was I noticed all of these other players on the team had, with the exception of Crumbs, who barely spent any time in the house, from what I remember. I think he had his own place, but and I know like Alex was there for a time, but like he wasn't there at this time. So but all the players that were coming in to live in the house were like, and some of the coaches too, they were all like estranged from their parents or had emotional problems, had like clear signs of anxiety and stuff like this. And I always just got to wondering about like why that was the case. Like it always made me super creeped out. Like out of all of the players, like in the world, you've managed to assemble a group of people that all seem like they just need to belong, man. They just need someone to give a shit about them. Like just anybody, like someone actually care about their own interests. Otherwise, this is gonna end real bad. That was like that was like the one time, because I've been around situations before where it's like, don't get involved, or you're a journalist, you see some stuff, you just got to write it up. But this was the first time I'd ever felt compelled to literally get someone away from it at all costs. That's how strongly I felt about it. I've been around all kinds of shit in my life, and my read was this story would have had, a sad ending if somebody didn't intervene. And I'm not the type of person to walk away from that stuff. I'll happily shoulder the responsibility. I wish more people would do that.
And so you did take Maria in, and you all became very, very close. And is it appropriate, you think, to say that you were paternal in a lot of different ways? Because I remember Badali was too originally in her life.
I mean, look, like there's not really a concept for it now. I had to listen to a lot of vile shit and implications for many years.
I remember that
from journalists and other public figures. Like, I think it's just a sad indictment of our times that nobody could believe that somebody like me and somebody like her, like I could just want to do something good for her. Like I like with the purest of intent. Like I just don't think people could understand it. I think people were like, there's got to be an angle. And the angle was she just needed someone to like care about her. That was it. Now I've obviously spent a lot of time talking to her family. I spent a lot of time before she passed trying to help rebuild the bridges and trying to get them to, we went and stayed with the family, during one set of holidays. And, things, that relationship again was really good and getting really rebuilt. I've seen again people on Twitter like attack a dad, and it's like, like that's not, just don't do that, man. Like, that just fucking, it's just a shitty thing to do to someone. But, obviously, like, I'm gonna be paternal. I know I'm that kind of guy anyway. Like, I like looking after people. I don't, it's like, it ain't got to be about anything just beyond, like, just know that, I'm gonna be there for you when you need the help. And so, yeah, she was like in medieval times, they would have called it like a ward is what they would have said. It was someone that didn't have anybody else that you've took under your wing to care about, without any weird, fucked up, sick, ulterior motives. And that was what I was doing. She needed somewhere to live. I had a big house. She needed someone to support her with a streaming career. I had streaming equipment. She needed somebody to help rebuild, her will to live and her confidence, and we did all those things. And she used to be really down on herself, and she used to really doubt herself. And we got her a place where she could go on stream, go on camera in her own time. This is someone who used to dread being on camera. She used to be a streamer, and we worked on a lot of stuff together. I tried to be as responsible as I can. We had therapy going on. I paid for that. Obviously the operations as well. So, I did what I could, and there was never anything more than just like, I actually just thought she was a really cool person, she was my best friend,
Yeah, I mean, and to the point that you mentioned, you like to just take people under your wing. I saw that not just with myself, but with others. In the professional sense too. Like, you never, at least not with me, and I don't think with others either, have ever sort of asked for anything in return. And I like that is one of the things I admire about you, is that you just have wanted to help people. And even people that don't deserve it sometimes too, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a cold world, man. Like, I think about all the times I was like, I just wanted somebody to just like I say, just back me, just please. Like, won't somebody back me? Like, even in my early career in esports, I had people telling me, you ain't going to be good on camera. You burn too many bridges. You're never going to amount to anything. You're not going to do it. And and that was coming from like people I looked up to and respected, and like that shit sucks. And so I've always tried to like just be someone that if somebody really wants the opportunity, like I'll give it to them. But equally as well, like if somebody is really in a dangerous situation, or like not just dangerous, but I mean like just sad, like just like I don't want to be the person to walk on by. I don't want to be the person to say you can't get involved. I don't want to be the person that says the prescribed wisdom in this situation is to do X, Y, and Z. I think we've built a lot of like I always hear about how the internet has like made us more connected, and isn't it amazing? It's like I don't feel that way at all. I think a lot
made
of
us
people,
more lonely in a lot for a lot of sense. It made us feel. I've been talking to Cecilia D'Anastasio about this. We talked about this on the when she was on the episode a few weeks ago. It's like the internet, and this worries me. And somebody I actually read a lot of and listen to a lot of his stuff is Scott Galloway, who's been sort of talking more broadly about like especially young men being lonely on the internet and how that leads to them being dangerous, etc. Right? Like and they find these pockets of the internet that make them feel accepted for the first time, but they are with those ulterior motives. They are with those very dangerous ideologies, etc. It's like, and Cecilia said on the podcast a few weeks ago, being a gaming reporter in 2022 requires you to be an extremist reporter. You have to understand, right? Those two things are like intrinsically blurred, not because the games make you extremist, but because some of the communities around them are really messed up, and then there are some awful things that happen in them. So it's tough. I think you're right. The internet it's made us more connected, but it's also made people more lonely, and it's made them feel connected to the wrong people that take advantage of them, etc.
Well, yeah, because and it's like the classic manipulation tactic. Like everyone, like to a certain degree, is going to be craving like just support and encouragement and human contact and all of that other stuff. And so if the only people you can get that from are like bad people, you're gonna take it. Eventually you'll break and you'll end up taking it. And so I think when you see like a lot of communities online. I mean, don't get me wrong, man. I mean, like the bullying, like that I saw Maria go through supposedly from the community is like, it shocked me. It shocked me how it genuinely shocked me how bad it was, how bad it can still be. The bullying I got after she passed, that shocked me. Some of the allegations that were made about like some of the things people said about me, like actually like. I couldn't process it. Like, it's wow. Like in public, it's like, Jesus. Like, there truly is no filter, and it's like there probably are some people out there that are that like messed up. I don't know. I don't even know what the percentage is. But when you're not one of them, and people are saying you are, it's like it's really hard to like push through that. And so, yeah, I think the internet, like I say, I'm still trying to have like an open. I know it sounds cheesy to say an open heart, but like I still try and want. I want to be the person I was when I looked after Maria. It's really hard because obviously I'm still probably dealing with a bit of like more than a bit. Like emotional trauma, like obviously PTSD. She passed in my house. I had to find her and deal with all of the aftermath of that. And it's not something you get over. So, the thing that's like hard is like knowing like could I do that again? Like, but if I don't, will somebody else? If I give myself a pass this time, like, will someone else come along and do it? And obviously, generally, the answer is no. So, and that mindset is why I haven't been able to quit doing the journalism in general. It's the same thing. Like a lot of the journalism I do is to try and clean something up or protect somebody or change something for the better. And every time I do it and I get like pushback or I get like abused or people don't want to believe it or there's no action, I think, right, that's it, quit. The healthy thing to do for yourself psychologically is quit. But then the voice comes in, if you quit, the next person isn't going to do it. So you stick around, you do it again. And it's like, it's the same thing with people. Like if I let this person down, if I don't help them, what if somebody else doesn't? And what would that look like? And where do we go to? What does the end stage look like? It could be something as trivial as like, if I don't give you a helping hand at the start of your career and nobody else does, maybe you don't have a career and we lose a fantastic journalist, right, for the space. And that sucks for us, but not the end of the world. But when you start talking about people like being on the streets or people being in bad situations, predators in the esports space, outrageous contracts that ruin people's lives and money that never gets paid, like these are all things where if you don't help, like there is a very negative outcome at the end of it. And so I don't know, man, I just can't be that guy. Like, I'm sure it's easier, but I cannot be the guy that like just lets that shit happen. I just can't, unfortunately, for me. but I can't.
Yeah, it is that want to help, and it does come through in a lot of your work. I feel like the work that on the internet point, the work that goes the most viral is the Richard Lewis is angry on stream at something.
The
But
reaction
it's like
content, yeah.
But it's the stuff that if you like parse if you were to go through every single thing you've ever posted video wise or whatever else, like you do see sort of the trend line, right? The like that you want to help, the accountability part of that you were just talking about, that etc. Like that comes through. It's just not the stuff that gets the massive amounts of retweets or likes
No,
or whatever. If somebody
people
clips
don't
it out,
really.
so
People are indifferent to that. So,
yeah. So I do want to talk about the esports talk moment and them sort of using the clip, and I'll tee this up for the audience too. So in the wake of Maria's passing, Richard was on a podcast, the Scuff podcast, hosted by Trainer X.
Yeah, to be fair, like I will say, I don't know how far after it was. I was shit faced, out of my mind. I have no concept of time for that period in my life. I was doing benzos and drinking heavily. I just tried to, I couldn't sleep. I would, so yeah, I was fucked up. I mean,
you were strung out basically. Yeah.
And so I don't even know if it was like 2 months after or 10 months after. I have no I genuinely can't tell you, so just in case it turns out that actually it wasn't just after, just for the benefit of I don't want you to get corrected, but yeah, I was I can't tell you.
But I do remember texting you that summer and you definitely were not okay, and just checking in on you, and it understandably so, right? Like the trauma associated with her death, and sort of the months to follow after that it took you to kind of get back to yourself a little bit more. So yes, Richard appeared on a podcast hosted by Trainwreck, the very popular Twitch streamer, called the Scuff Podcast. Other guests on the episode included S-Fan, Asmongold, Slasher. I'm trying to remember the entire cast, but high-profile people in sort of the Twitch sphere, etc. And at one point, Richard got pretty fed up, and as he can explain, was pretty hammered, and basically. The exact quote was basically getting jerk off remorse for coming on this podcast. And it was not your brightest moment that you've obviously reflected on publicly and in public before. But where this came back up again a second time was early 2021. Richard was chosen to be a replacement talent or rather Athena left G2 and they needed a host for this event, this Rocket League event. They chose Richard, and the Rocket League community sort of came after Richard because Richard had, again, as we talked about early in this episode, beefed with people on Twitter and etc. And so then in a video made about the reaction to Richard's hiring for this event, Esports Talk used the clip of him on Trainwreck's podcast more or less to discredit him and to make him look like an asshole. And eventually it was drawn back in a correction. They did sort of an edit on YouTube. The video still exists. It was not taken down.
Yeah.
But it was edited with that part out in YouTube's inline editor where you can edit without removing something. And it now carries itself a pinned comment from the Esports Talk channel making an apology to Richard. And I think the reason I bring it up is I want to talk about sort of, I think there's a part of this work that builds naturally a paranoia to kind of being treated that way, being a public figure, etc. And we were talking about it earlier, the defensive gag reflex of just immediately going at somebody when somebody says something. That was definitely a case where that was warranted 100%. Reflecting on that a little bit now, 18 months ish later, how do you think that impacted kind of your worldview of things and your place in the industry? Because it was probably the most vile use of something against you that I've seen more broadly.
Yeah, and so deliberately done as well. It was done maliciously because I've never had a great relationship with either of those guys. I first met Jake Lucky, who when he used to do CS:GO roster leaks, but then he got in an argument with Mo, so he published a video. Another popular streamer in CSGO, he published a video where he'd like found like a profile that used his profile pic on like a dating app that wasn't even one of the big dating apps, and said this is like proof that Mo's cheating on his wife. Like, imagine that. Like, imagine doing that. Imagine like as a journalist, like doing that. Right, so I pulled him up, and obviously it turned out it wasn't Mo's profile. It was nonsense, you know. And I had him on a podcast, and basically I gave him like the patron saint of esports journalism lecture. But I thought I was respectful. I thought I was nice to him, but he didn't like it. He got upset. Obviously, a few barbs on Twitter. Anyway, he's got a friend, you know, this Hunter Grooms, whatever he's called. And so, you know, anytime there's an opportunity to take me down a peg or two. And again, look, that Rocket League situation was just another situation. I just didn't help myself. I'm arguing with literal teenagers in the middle of the night. Like, what are you doing? But, you know, people were trying to hack my shit. I got annoyed. People were trying to hack my Discord. My emails pinging, my phone's pinging. People are trying to hack my emails. People are trying to hack my Facebook. Like, it was thousands of people. I got a video on it. It wasn't just like a couple of kids. It was thousands of people all at once saying unbelievable shit about me, trying to hack all my stuff. And so I snapped and started, like, you know, giving as good as I got, let's say. The difference being, of course, I'm a grown-ass man and they're children. So, you know, Hunter saw an opportunity to get some clicks because I'm the bad guy of the day. I'm Twitter's villain of the day. Obviously, that's great engagement. All they care about is engagement. Certainly not accuracy or quality of work. And so they took every clip. They Googled my name. They looked for clips of me doing like things where I was like bad. Like, and like it was like in the summary of the video, they took that clip of me like just like out of my mind. I should never have been on a podcast. I put myself in that position. Again, I wasn't making good life choices at the time. And, you know, like he's saying, well, you know, Train does have a point about Richard Lewis, and maybe some of the Rocket League community kids do too. And it's like, what? This is the great connection? Trainwreck has got fuck all to do with Rocket League. He's not a Rocket League personality. He's not a Rocket League caster. He doesn't
there wasn't a Rocket
League
person on the show.
There wasn't a Rocket League person on the show at all. It was just my worst moment, like I was talking about earlier. I was in a lot of pain. I was in existential pain. I was in unbelievable mental pain. I was suicidal. I was like out of my mind. Like I can't express enough like how bad a state I was in for that period of my life. And, you know, I went and I thought, let's go on the most popular podcast, not because I'm an idiot. You know, like I do things that like, and also as well, like probably in the back of my mind, it's a self-destructive impulse. It's like standing next to the ledge of a, you know, it's like standing on the edge of a cliff and thinking, well, what if I fall? Like, you know, it was like that. I knew bad things could happen. I don't think I was as well protected. I mean, like, I can't watch the clip. It physically induces so much, like, cringe and uncomfortable. It's very hard to watch anything I did from that time. But, you know, like, them putting that in that video is just like so beyond the pale of what's fair. And it's like, it's what I mean about it's like we never learn any lessons. Because, like, I remember Etika and all and the Keemstar stuff, and it's like, I don't know, maybe when people are actually fucking broken and really suffering and it's abundantly clear, like, maybe don't keep poking them. Maybe, like, let them go away and heal before something bad happens. Like, I'm not trying to compare myself to that tragic situation.
No,
and I'm not trying to put all the blame on one individual. Yeah. But, like, when are we going to learn, like, how to handle this shit better, you know? And it's like... that to me felt really cruel. It felt really cruel to do that to me, like to score some internet points. And so I don't know, man. Like maybe I deserve that. I don't think I do. No. And so how did it change my worldview? Like I don't know, man. Like I say, that's probably the moment I got to the mindset where it's like I guess I do just get the rotten fruit pelted at me. I guess that's just how it works, right? Anybody can do anything to me, and I just have to tolerate it. I just have to accept it. Because what really was the downside of that? You know?
Yeah.
They left esports talk, like, you know, like, dude, in like 3 years, like, Jake Lucky's going to have won like a Journalist of the Year award, probably Hunter Grooms as well. Like they're gonna. There's no comeuppance. There's no
Yeah.
like he even refused to apologize to me privately. He said he never would.
I do think our industry, there are a lot of journalists that obviously I talk to a lot of our peers pretty frequently, and I think like that particular situation is awful, and I think that there is a lot of looking at Jake's work, and Jake's been invited on the show, and I would like to have him because I'd like to ask some of these questions to his face and to him personally.
Yeah, and by the way, like
and he
I'm
is,
only mentioning
yeah.
Jake because they were at the same company, and
Great,
that was a little bit of the history. Like Jake had nothing to do with any of that, as far as I'm aware, and certainly my ire, if you want to call it that, is firmly aimed at the other dude, and
right,
and
right,
like yeah.
So, but all that to say, like, I think that a lot of our industry traditional journalists are very doomsaying about what the work that Jake and Hunter are doing, and kind of obviously they go viral quite regularly in the sense that they're sharing, like when the Amaranth stuff happened 2 weeks ago, they were the guys. Hunter was the guy that was sharing all the relevant clips, and I'm sure they have source of networks of people who send them Twitch clips and whatever else as well to be able to post these things. But I think a lot of our industry is like, oh my God, they're ruining the industry, etc. I don't think it's that bad. I think that our industry still does have good accountability journalism in a lot of different ways. And ultimately, I think that our industry, I had a conversation earlier this year, and I don't want to share everything I talked to him about, but it was like, it has stuck with me throughout my entire year. I went through some stuff mentally at the beginning of this year. I sort of just disconnected from a lot of different people, was not in a very good spot, and was like trying to get to a good spot to be back in entrepreneur mode and focused. But I had sort of this conversation with Casey Newton, the tech journalist, and I went into it, and I was just incredibly like doomsaying this conversation for myself, for the industry, etc. And I was like, man, like I'm just like so tired. I've been doing this for 7 years. Like things just keep like not going my way in certain ways, and I was like just very frustrated. And the one thing that Casey said to me that really stuck with me and has stuck with me this entire year is like basically that I was in the first inning. That like we are still very much in the first inning for games as a whole, definitely for esports, that like things will get better. And so like, yeah, it may suck now, but that we are the very beginning of something. Even 20 years deep into this whole esports thing, like we're still at the very beginning of what is to come. And so I try to live with that perspective for myself every single day, to know that like even when Jake or Hunter or anyone else or any other journalist, there are a lot of bonehead journalists covering video games do stuff that I'm not like, I used to get so angry about it. How dare they like screw with this industry and make this industry look so stupid. I'm less concerned about that now, but that doesn't excuse the vile nature of what happened to you.
No, and look, man, like I don't even have any like particular beef for what they do. I just don't think it's very high quality. I've always been a little bit snooty about journalism, I think like waking up every day and like, oh, what's the top clip on live stream fails? And like, well, I'll tweet that out with, and with like a question to encourage engagement. It's not like I don't know what the formula is, it's like, but and listen, there's a market for that. It's fast food. It's sort of fast food journalism. It's just like Zoomers these days, that like think a 10-minute YouTube video is too long, which is why shorts and all this crazy like 30-second content, 60-second content's getting pushed. Like they ain't got time. Like it's attention economy. So fair enough. So you go on Jake Lucky's feed, you can scroll his last 5 tweets, and you get like a little digest of all the stories of the day. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm probably being a snob, I guess. But I also do think that the problem you've got is there's a generation of journalists now that are coming into the space. They don't want to be a Jacob Wolf. They want to be a Jake Lucky.
Yeah.
You feel me?
It's become about the and I hate this. You're about to like set me off. Nothing to do with myself. Everything to do with it. It's about the clout that comes with the job, the public recognition that comes with the job, and not the mission statement of holding people accountable. To questioning power, etc., whatever it might be. And that's journalism, right? And that's not new. It's just been sort of amplified by the internet. And I think that there are a lot of journalists who now, young journalists I'm talking to, where it's like, no, I had a young journalist the other day, love him to death, nothing wrong with him, said, I want to be the next Jacob Wolf or Richard Lewis. I want to go down in the history books as that. And I like stopped him mid-private conversation. I was just like, brother, no. Like, be you, right? Like, the difference that I always found sort of in your shadow early in my career was like, I respected what you wanted to do. I wanted to take the pieces that I could learn from what you were doing, watching what you were doing, etc. But I never wanted to be Richard Lewis. I wanted to be me.
I don't want to be Richard Lewis, bro. So that's not a surprise.
But no, I don't mean that as an insult. I just like, I didn't want to be a carbon copy of you.
No, I get it.
Wanted to
You've got to find your own voice and everything.
Yeah, who I was, do the work that interests me, the work that my audience finds interesting, etc. And there already exists one of you. I don't need to be the Richard Lewis number 2, right? Like that's, and so I think like this industry doesn't, it's the clout, it's the fame, it's sort of the recognition of it all, right? And it's not necessarily the mission statement. And I think that like ultimately comes to, because a lot of the journalists that get in this industry, myself included, did not go to journalism school. We are passion driven. We liked video games. We liked esports, whatever, or like esports. And we want to help, and be a part of this community, a part of the narrative, the voice, etc. So it really does, that part of that really does bother me. It's got to be mission statement driven. True.
Yeah, and like I just would love to see like, more of that. I really would, like, just people who want to break stories. But yeah, the problem you've got is like I see a lot of these journalists that are on the come up. Like some of them, it's like, oh, hey, here's an account, and I'm anonymous, which I always hate when you're a journalist. I hate that because you can't do it. There's no accountability for you as the journalist. But here's a Pokemon avatar, and my name is named after the Pokemon, and I'm breaking roster moves. And then when I get things wrong, I say, oh, well, whoopsie doodle, my source was wrong. My bad, won't happen again. It's like, yo, what is happening? Like, and those people, they don't have any mentors to help them out. They just eventually, as you say, they get to a place where it's like popular or it's like clout-driven stuff. And then, but if they're not big, like Jay Lucky's like got 350,000 followers on Twitter. Like he unfortunately probably is the most popular esports journalist, right? But like when they only have like 10,000 Twitter followers and they don't get invited to hang out with streamers and they don't get to sit on core streams and give their opinion, if that doesn't come inside of a year or two, they all just say, I'm quitting. And
there's no way to monetize it.
Yeah. You never really knew who these dudes were to begin with.
Well, that's the today actually topical, because Nabillion, maybe I'm mispronouncing that, the game aggregator on Twitter, basically said like, I'm done with this. Like, he had launched a Patreon. Nobody really subscribed to it in meaningful enough number to get him like actual meaningful revenue. And this guy's like finding every tidbit of gaming news and sharing it all over Twitter. There were a lot of jokes today that gaming journalists followed him to know what they should be writing about, because he just like was way more plugged in than they were. And then final straw was he didn't want, had sort of aversion to Elon Musk and said, all right, pull the plug. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And just like privated the account and walked away. Which is exactly to your point. It's like there's engagement doesn't necessarily equal dollars.
Yeah, it's that. Well, I mean, to be fair as well, like, if you're doing, sounds like that guy was doing good work, right? So if you're doing good work and nobody wants to reward you for it, I mean, that's its own sort of separate, sad indictment about the state of the industry. Like, why wouldn't you want to? Why wouldn't somebody want to like hire that guy and pay them? Because that's another thing. Yeah. Like, I mean, dude, I know that we're like probably over time for what you had planned. I don't know how long these things are going to be, but like obviously all of these, like all the the upcomers and all of that, like that have gone under. It's like, why'd you keep employing like people that offer no value and like 6-figure salaries, like in the management department, like these, and then you've got good like boots on the ground writers and people with like followings and stuff. You employ like 40 staff writers to rewrite other people's news. It's like, dude, like, go get the one guy that breaks every big story, pay him a handsome salary, which, by the way, will be a king's ransom to this individual because they've never been paid before, and you've nailed it. Like, this stuff isn't rocket science.
Set them up for success.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Encourage them to come out from behind that anonymous title. Help them build a brand. Help them learn some transferable skills. Help them network. Reciprocal relationships.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's none of that going on, is there?
No, and I think that, I was a part of the George Getty's recruiting process to come back to Dot, which he ultimately did. And I talk to LEC Wulu somewhat frequently nowadays, and trying to be that, considering obviously sort of built took Roster Mania to the other level of building a whole fucking show around the damn thing, trying to help these people so much as I can, because it's not really of my interest, at least have it be of someone else's, right? But that's the saddest part about where the state of the industry for journalism right now is that those mentors don't exist at all. And they're not employed. There aren't seasoned editors at a lot of these publications anymore. And the ones that are, there's too many mouths to feed from a writer's perspective. And so it's really tough. I think that's what really pains me, is there's not really a place to learn. And I think the last part of that too, just to bookend this topic, is there's a real issue in games, probably not exclusive to games, but I've noticed it a lot in games, where games writers, games journalists, esports journalists, etc., are so narrow-minded in the sense that they don't have other interests in tech, they don't have interest in sports, they don't have interest in politics. And so to them, you, Richard Lewis, are the sort of epitome of everything. You are the end-all be-all. Your career is the tippy top of where journalism forever can go. And it's just no, I think what was always helpful to me was that's the top for this industry, but there's a bunch of other people over there doing a bunch of other stuff and other things, sports, tech, etc. Right? That's where I want to be. Go over there. Go chase those people, right? And chase those highs and successes. And unfortunately, in gaming and esports, I feel like there's just not a lot of interest there from in other topics to have that very helpful perspective in people's career.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
So, okay, we are long, but it's been a good discussion. I don't want to cut it off. We do have a couple different audience questions, but these accounts are, one, I don't think in the space, and two, don't have followers. So I would be very, very concerned. They're good questions. They type them out, but I would be very concerned about bringing these people up to ask questions and them potentially being hateful.
Or right. Yeah,
yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a spaces thing, right? Yeah, so I thought you were just going to read the questions.
Yes, so I will read them, but normally we do have people come up and actually ask, but in the sort of interest of keeping this civil, I will not do that this time, especially because these people just don't have actual accounts or don't have any followers, etc. So they seem like kind of burner accounts, but they're good questions. So thank you for the questions, people. We touched on this a little bit, but this is a topic I wanted to sort of bookend the podcast with, and it comes from this listener. Question is from @GrimeDoes, the name Justin Camp. So the question is, question for Richard Lewis. Mm-hmm. Why do you not quit? Time and time again, people rally against you and you keep trying. What keeps you pushing forward?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Okay, so there's potential answers. I never really know. Maybe I'm hoping that one day I'm gonna get the shine that I sort of secretly think I deserve. Maybe someone's gonna say nice things about me just once. That'll do. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's that. Maybe I don't feel I've had the pat on the head, the appreciation. So, I mean, like I say, it's so hard psychologically, unpack yourself. But I do know that there is obviously a little bit of fear of oblivion in terms of the one thing, whether they tell you or not, the one thing that everybody's terrified of is not having an audience. Once you've had it, that you're going to wake up one day and just nobody gives a shit about what you have to say. And the problem with that is do I have enough confidence that if I talk about something else, people will give a shit? And I get hate messages every day. There was a hate message the other day just saying, you're never going to quit esports because without it, you're just another loser, or, words to that effect. It's the only reason you have anything in your life. And, maybe there's a element of truth in that. I always try and reflect even on the negative messages, So maybe. And the other thing as well is, like I say, there is definitely and I know this to be true. For me, there's a very real existential fear that I don't think our industry is in a good place. I think our industry is becoming increasingly weird and dangerous and full of bad actors, and we're getting back to the dark old days of when a guy in a cheap suit could sell a bunch of kids a bunch of promises and fuck their whole lives up. And we're getting back to that. And now we've got tyrannical regimes funding it as well. And we've got like this strange little political dance everybody has to do, where it's okay to talk about this issue in America, but we mustn't bring it up and talk about it over there because, you know, like, oh, actually, don't worry, you know, and they're funding everything. And it's the whole reason. It's like this, when people talk about like sports washing, I don't think they realize like Saudi Arabia aren't doing it because they want you to think they're a nice like nation, like they're indifferent. They couldn't give a solitary fuck. But it's to have they are funding all of these things to have the cultural capital to make you afraid to criticize what they do, and for there to be real financial repercussions when you do. So our landscape has evolved to be this like real dystopian version of esports. And I'm trying, man. Like, I'm still trying after all these years, 18 years or whatever it's been. I'm still trying. I'm still trying to make it good. But I got to be honest. I've reached a part in my life that I never thought I would get to, where I would wish we could just tear it down and start again. I hate where we're at. I hate what we've become. I hate the fact that my work hasn't had a bigger impact and steered us in the right direction. I actually do look back at my career now. It's been a waste of time. I wasted my life. Like a legit, like this sounds bleak. Sorry, but it's not a midlife crisis. I promise. It is a sober assessment of everything I've done in a space that hasn't really changed because of it. Like, it's affected people's lives. Sure, it's affected individuals, sure, but it hasn't affected structures and systems. We've done a massive backslide on integrity issues like dual ownership and, you know, ethical money and stuff like this. Like in 2016, when I wrote an article and said this guy owns this team and this team, and they're playing in the same league, boom, there was a statement released from the game developer that day. Like, well, you got to drop one of the teams. And don't you ever do it again. And actually, no, fuck you, get out my league. And the person would come out and apologize and say, well, we weren't aware. And then there was activity in 2016. People were on the ball. People cared. They don't now. I put out that same story here in 2022, and everyone goes, well, whatever. So anyway, I don't know. I don't quit because like there's like a handful of us doing the type of work that, you know, we've been talking about the entire time, and like we're a dying breed. We are not being replaced. Like you must have noticed, like we are not being replaced. There is some weird, fucked up hybrid journalist influencer that is starting to dominate the space. And trust me, they are never going to rock the boat. They are never going to chase down legal documents. They are never going to look into conflict of interest. In fact, they are going to willfully participate in the conflict of interests that benefit them. You know, I'm not saying, oh, it's got to be about me and I wear a cape and a zoom. If somebody, please, like, just somebody come in and just do the same thing. And then it's like, right, my watch is over. That's how I feel about it. So it's probably a combination of all of those things.
Well, I would implore you, think as much as you can of the first inning thing, right? Like it will get better. The way I think about it more.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that assessment.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
I think I don't agree with that assessment that we're in the first inning. I don't think I think that's like that. I can't believe that's spoken by somebody with like who's been in this industry for any particular length of time. What we've done is we've been on a petri dish, and and the bacteria has been fed sugar and turbocharged, and we're not like blazing a trail in the same way baseball was in America, or, you know, soccer, if you're American, or it's football was in, you know, Europe. We're not blazing that same trail. In fact, we have been able to, you know, build and borrow and take all of these things. And yes, it's new tech, but it evolves super quick. Like the start of the internet is unrecognizable to 20 years later. You know what I mean? It is like and 20 years from now, it's going to be completely different. What we are is we're not so much in the first inning as we've had an accelerated life cycle to the point where this is conceivably a period where esports as we knew it and esports as it was built could totally die. Right? I'm not saying you wouldn't have competitive gamings, yeah, like out there, like competitive gaming. I'm not saying that wouldn't exist. I'm not saying like developers wouldn't bake in leagues and ladders or whatever, but the idea, the concept of an open circuit esports where anyone can compete all around the world and anyone can run these things, that is dying before my eyes. And it is not, and it is a bad thing. It is a bad thing for competition. It is a bad thing for the industry in general. It's a bad thing for access. It's giving already powerful corporations even more influence over people. They're doing business deals with even worse people to make more money. No, it's like, I don't think there's like another period. If we don't fix it, there's not like another period after this where we hit some utopia. It just becomes the matches are fixed. If you say anything about it, you go probably to literal jail or your career is over, and the fans just cheer like circus seals because they have been brainwashed by TikTok videos to not even give a fucking shit. So, that's where we're headed. Like, it's not first innings, it's not first phase. We've got real problems and we need to address them, in my opinion. Like, so I think I am like watching the esports apocalypse. I genuinely believe it. If these things do not change the course we're on, esports as it was does not exist in 10 years.
I guess I'm just more optimistic that there's a rebirth. I don't disagree with you that things are going kind of south and downward. And look, I'm sort of the biggest critic about the VC money and how it was spent more than most in our industry, having reported on all those damn deals for all those years. I think that I'm not convinced that League of Legends is the biggest esports game to ever exist ever, right? Like, I think there will be something else one day. And I guess I'm hopeful that when gaming gets bigger, which it will, because now we're entering a generation of Gen Alpha who sort of gaming is the biggest part of their cultural connection to each other, etc. Right? Like, they're not people who eventually got into it in social circles. It's certainly not like my generation where, I think I'm right at the tail end of where it's like, it wasn't a socially acceptable activity and people, oh, you're a nerd because you play it or whatever else. Right. Like, now it's a generation where it's cool. And I'm hopeful that when that generation when they have real money, when they sort of eventually, get out of college, they have real jobs, they can spend money on things, that generation will be in such mass that esports in its small percentage of the entire gaming bubble will be something different. And I think that for me, like, yes, I think we should continue to address the thing you're talking about, sports washing, sort of conflicts of interest, etc. But I'm hopeful that what we're in right now is just the early stage of something way bigger than what we can even imagine. That's where I'm hoping that we get to, more broadly as an industry. That's
I genuinely
maybe I'm wrong.
I genuinely believe that. Like, I'm working on a sort of, I don't know, it might even become a book, but its working title is "The Party Is Over," and it's just talking about how esports failed, like talking about being there on the roots, like where it was like literally people from all over the place, like coming on the internet, like getting to know each other, people traveling all over the world to get to play against each other. You get to be whoever you want. You don't even have to use your name. People might only know you as your gamer tag, and this emerging technology and all the realms of possibilities. Creating our own rules for video games. We had to do that at the start, right? Like, what you think MR15 and CS:GO just sprung up? No, there was like years and years of like experimentation about what was the best format and what should we do, and there was arguments about it. And vibrant community, like friendly civil wars. This was like carved out of rock, man. Like, people will never know how hard it was to push this boulder up the hill, right? And so, but it was worth it because of the promise that it had. It's like the idea of being able to compete in a digital space so anyone can do it. The idea of like people from many different cultures, nationalities, like, genders, everything, all just being able to come together in one place, like through shared commonality and to do it. Like, all of this is like amazing. This blew my mind mind when I was watching this unfold. Like, I can't explain to you. It was like being a boomer, you know, like seeing this play out on the internet and thinking of all the promise that it held, and then now seeing it just subverted to this. It is shameful. It disgusts me. It disgusts me, and you know, and it's getting worse. Like, it's like that's the problem with it. It's getting appreciably worse.
Well, and it's taking advantage just to end this topic too. Like, it's taking advantage of a time where esports needs financial validation and money, and the money is run dry. And it's nothing to do. It's nothing to do with the economic environment. I'm tired of reading that. It's not. It's because for 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 2015, 2016. Some people, some knowingly, some not, some gullibly, sold a lie to a set of investors, a very highly connected set of investors in the Western world, in America and in Europe, where they, peddled and pushed all of these different things, all these big promises, and then they got all these people's money, and they never figured out how to make a return. Never. And it's why you see every single esports team work their salt, horizontally integrating what they do. You look like at 100 Thieves, and it's like, great, well, we're going to build a game now, we're going to launch an energy drink, we're going to do everything that is not competitive esports, because at least that will maybe make us money. Right?
And,
like the competitive,
and that's what worries me about this new generation. You're talking about this influx, about people looking at it and being cool, because, like, what do they really want to be? Do they want to be simple and be the best player in the world? Do they want to be a faker, or do they want to be, like, I don't know, pick an influencer that's like vague?
I think they'll want to be.
I'm almost
I think
scared
they'll want to be
pick
both.
An example.
I think they'll want to be both. I'm hopeful that they'll want to be both, because ultimately esports is a very small microcosm of a bigger gaming world, right? Like, the gaming industry is huge, and esports, our little bubble, is tiny in a bigger part of that. I'm hopeful that will continue to happen, where the bubble just gets bigger. The gaming bubble gets bigger. So there will be influencers. There will be people that focus on the content, engagement, etc. But there will also be those other people. There just won't be as many of them. That's what I'm hopeful about. I think that the bubble just has to get bigger so that the esports bubble gets bigger. That's the perspective.
Yeah, and look, there might be some truth in that. I mean, it's no coincidence that all the big, like, successful esports organizations, the ones that actually seem to make money. I mean, I nearly said FaZe there, but obviously I don't know what's going on with their public floating right now, so I'll hold that one. But like 100 Thieves, fantastic example. G2. I know they've had a lot of problems lately, but they were a huge success story up until this, aberration. And so, look, I get it. They're all the ones that have blended savvy social media presence, cool merchandising, excellent teams, and all had incredible influences that fit their brand representing them. But again, it is just worth noting that 100 Thieves, I think, won, like, esports org of the year. And last time I clicked on their website, they were doing a merch drop, and there wasn't a single mention anywhere I could find of, like, their teams or their players or any of that stuff. And it's like, listen, I'm not even adverse to that. Like, but unfortunately, the problem you've got is, if the kids come in and they 100, they play a video game and they see a player that's good and they want to be that player, and so they start working harder, and then they support 100 Thieves because that player plays for them, and they start watching the games. It's like that used to be the very natural progression you would go through. Now it's more likely they see a stream. This guy streams for 100 Thieves. What's 100 Thieves? Oh, they sell clothes.
Yeah. I think that it will be, I think it ultimately is just these teams have to reinvent themselves to be something that can monetize, which the esports audience is not.
Totally understand it and totally get where you're coming from. Like,
and I think, again, like and this is not to insult these people, but the Juked app, the esports social media app that Ben Goldhaber, former Twitch, and Chris Chan, who obviously you've done a lot of work with.
No, Chris very well,
in the past. They launched a social media app specific for hardcore esports fans, and they couldn't get past 20,000 users. And that was, like, really telling to me. Again, not insulting them. I really love them both as people, but it was really telling to me that there are less than 20,000 people in the Western world who are hyper engaged with esports. Like, people that are, like, actively plugged in.
That might be an accurate assessment. Another thing is, though, the marketing around Juked was weird in the sense, and I think I've talked to Chris about this, was that they were doing that thing some people do where it's like they create a real, like, we've got the solution to this problem that we're telling you about. That isn't a problem, really.
Correct.
When they were doing that with the whole, like, talking online is so toxic, and there's you can do it here, and no one can hide, and no one can say mean things. I don't know. This kind of sounds lame. Like, these sports fans I know, like it's not that big a problem that there's some shit talk on social media for real. Like, that's like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like,
not bigotry, but
not bigotry.
There's a difference.
I'm not talking about this stuff right now. But I never got on board with this idea of, like, I hated the way toxicity morphed to be like a catch-all term for sometimes people are assholes to each other as part of the human experience. Sometimes people insult each other as part of the human experience. I think it's a massively overblown problem, if indeed it is a problem at all. And putting that front and center as like, we're the solution to that, when I think it's not, it wouldn't even make, like, what do you hate about being an esports fan? Probably doesn't make the top 5, does it? So that seemed to be the bigger problem there for me. But that read could be wrong. I'm not a marketing guy.
I do think that like, looking at numbers, like when you write something about esports, it is far less important and engaged with more broadly. And I think it's just because the audience is just there. Obviously, millions of people who watch esports tournaments, Worlds is going on right now, et cetera. The major just started, et cetera. There are going to be millions of people that watch that over its span of both of those events. However, if I don't know how many of those people open up the Twitter app and go, fine, Richard Lewis, Jacob Wolf, go down the list of people that are hyper relevant to the esports space and read them, sort of tidbit minutia thing. And I think that, like, I think it's just an audience size problem at the very end of the day. Like, it's just the audience is just not big enough yet. I think it will be. I'm hopeful it will get bigger. But I think, like, being able to diversify what you're doing to weather the storm until it does, that to me, I think is interesting. And this happens in sports too. I mean, like, Red Bull is a good example of this.
I think baked into esports, this is something I think about. I'm not, it's like a half-baked idea. I hope I articulate it kind of well enough. But for me, I think there is a baked-in problem into esports in the sense that, I talk a lot about the attention economy. And, it's like, why would I play this game over this game? Why would I? But you're not just competing with games. If you're a game, you don't just compete against other games. You compete against movies. You compete against experiences. You compete against, I don't know, scrolling Twitter. You compete against, like, it's everything. It's like, I have X amount of hours I can spare in the day. So why would I do it on this? Now, as our access to experience is increased infinitely with just the ubiquitousness of internet access and internet devices, mobile phones, things that can just pull up. You can watch a movie on a phone while you're, on a lunch break. You can, your lunch break isn't that long, let's be real. Unionize people. But, you can watch an episode of TV and do all that stuff, right? And any given moment. So I've got these limited amounts of time. Why would I spend it on something as, like, convoluted as esports? And this is the issue.
Correct.
So yeah, so I sit down. I have to get good at the game. So now I got like 2-4 hours a day I got to practice. What's that? The pros are doing it for 8. Shit. I don't even know if I have 8 hours, but okay, I can up it to 6. But what, I got to learn about the scene as well? Well, how do I do that? Now I'm going to look at what websites I go to. Are they updated regularly? Okay, well, Wikipedia seems to be on top of its game. What about the Reddit threads? I have to go and check that, like 2-3 times a day because of the way the indexing works. How do I find out who the journalists are? How do I find out who the good journalists are? Do I even need to know who the journalists are? What about the casters? Where's their personal streams? Where's their YouTube channels? Now I've got to watch that, learn this, do that, absorb this, and it's all just so spread out and scattered. Discoverability is an absolute nightmare, and everything people are doing is essentially a time sink in a world where increasingly I might want to spend my time doing other things. So I think, like, esports has this, like, fundamental issue that it's like the hardcore esports are really going to struggle to retain audiences and to gain new people that engage with it because it's just so much. Whereas, like, what I kind of find interesting about Valorant is, like, for instance, Valorant seems to have taken already existing, pre-understood concepts from other games that seem to have been popular enough that they've gone into some sort of, like, brain hive mind of that generation. And also, it's very simple. its structure of its esports is simple. There's only X amount of teams you really need to care about, X amount of players you really need to care about. Here's a co-stream of a guy you might have already been following, because why wouldn't you be? And so they've done a good job of like kind of like separating wheat from the chaff, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise to me that esports has kind of struggled to have, like to consistently grow year upon year, massive audiences. Like having an awareness of something doesn't mean I want to spend all my waking hours doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Shannon Lau from the Washington Post is in the space, and she wrote a really good article that got her a ton of crap this past week about the League of Legends World Championship.
Which one was that?
Yeah, she wrote about the experience of attending Worlds in New York and sort of the excitement and the engagement. And it effectively, like, my take of after reading it was like, yes, esports, to what you just said, takes like 20 hours a week to like truly be fully engaged. And most people just don't have that, right? Like they just don't have it in their daily lives, especially as they're getting older. And a lot of league people gave her a lot of crap as like, you're an outsider, etc. And it's like, no, that's not the problem. The problem is that you guys on Reddit are the people that have the time to do the 20 plus hours a week. And you are the minority, the vocal minority of the people that are, consuming this content. Most people, I went to Worlds this past weekend in Atlanta, and I like was sitting next to a group of 4 guys that like, they play League ever so often. They're in their mid 30s. They have families, etc. And they were just like, yeah, we haven't really been hyper engaged with League in like 8 years, but we like saw that it was coming to our local region, Atlanta, the Southeast, and we all figured we'd get together and come to this thing. I think there are a lot of those people.
Yeah.
They just don't have time to like get into the weeds 20 plus hours a week and all the time, but maybe they had a connection to it once upon a time, and they, will show out to events. They'll watch Worlds when it's on every single year, but they're not going to be the people consuming LCS regular season in the middle of the summer.
And you see loads of posts like this, like when a TI or a Worlds or like a major rolls around, you see people being like, I ain't followed the scene in a year. What's going on? Is it? And the thing is as well, that like, in sports, I could give you a quick, they won this cup and they went there and they went to the playoffs and that guy got injured and that guy retired and this guy got fired. You could reasonably do it. How do I explain a year of esports to people? Like, think about everything that happens in a single year of esports. Like, how would I ever catch you up on everything? Like, I couldn't.
Yeah,
it would be too much content. Yeah, so you see that all the time.
We used to do these posts at ESPN in the wrestling department called the Laps Guide to WrestleMania, where we would basically give you, here's the past year in WWE, all the way up now. So if you only watch WrestleMania, that's your only thing you watch once a year, you have the sort of the one article that is SEO friendly, etc., that you can read to get the entire year you've missed to enjoy the one event in April or whatever, right?
Yeah,
and like we did it once for League, and it was like super well trafficked, because I think it was a lot of those people that were just like, man, Worlds is coming up, and it's like, oh, it's an ESPN article writing about like what's happening in League of Legends for the past year, like what ostensibly has gone on that I have not paid attention to. And I think that it's content overload. Ultimately, I think that's esports' biggest problem. Yeah. But we'll end on this.
I'll have to read that, because I really like I like Shannon's work, so I must have missed that one. It's been a busy week for me, so.
Yes,
I'll definitely hunt that article down.
The League fans need to back off, because she's right. Her analysis of the situation is pretty spot on. So the hardcore League people, stop being so butthurt. It's okay. It's okay that you have more time on your hands than other people, and nobody's going to give you crap for that. So anyway, so we'll end on this. This is from Ruined Trajectory. The part of this, I'll tee up this question with saying, part of this, a lot of this podcast has been sort of talking about very realistic and image of what's going on, and some of that's doomsaying and sort of disappointment, etc. But I actually really like this question, which is, Richard, what is the one thing outside of esports that gives you the most joy in life?
Now, I saw somebody submit this question. I saw it was submitted direct on the Twitter thing.
Yep.
And I was thinking, like, if Jacob asks this, how am I going to answer it? Because there's no, like, I always try and be honest. I don't think an honest answer here is like sensible at all, because I think it would just make people weirded out. Like, I don't know. I don't really like. Obviously, I got friends. I'm a normal human being. I go out. I get to hang out with my friends like once a week. I'm probably still living like a college student when I'm 40 years old. and that's probably sad and tragic or whatever. I don't know, but I enjoy it, and that. But like, I don't know, man. Like, I try not to think too much about that. Honestly, that question, because I don't, everything I've been through the last few years, there's not really a lot of happiness, like it's like I'm not even there yet. I'm not even at the stage where, like, I've just got past I haven't even got past it. What am I saying? But I'm in the process of getting past the depression and self-loathing and negative thoughts, and I'm getting to a place where maybe there's a possibility at some point I could feel like happy, I think. So, it's like joy is like it's fucking miles away. So yeah, like, I don't know. That's what I mean about answering that question. It's like everyone's gonna be like, "Oh God, that's like sad," and you've made it the last question. But like, I don't know, just being with friends, and I guess okay. Here you go. Good answer. Getting off the internet and being with friends and realizing like you ain't gotta take this shit so serious all the time.
Yeah. Well, please. Our industry is better because you're here in a lot of different ways, and your contribution, despite tattered by a lot of people on the internet, is very important. Has been very important. Is very important. I mean, I think reading your work this year, the Esports Iron Curtain series that you're doing is incredibly unique in its insight. And I'm not alone in thinking that. Like, I have a few friends who will send it to me every time it comes out, and people are like, "Oh wow, this is like something I hadn't really think about." A unique point of view, whatever it might be.
One more, I think, this month on that, and then I guess we'll put that series to bed. But yeah,
it's good.
Kind of say so.
Yeah, I think that it's a topic of discussion that I think you think about critically, and at a broader topic in the world that's bigger than just esports, and I think, but ultimately has its own effects that we're seeing, but aren't very deeply covered. There's been some good coverage of it, but not in sort of the routine depth.
Yeah, like Kevin had some pieces on. Kevin had some pieces on it, and I think Mikhail at the
Post.
He's at the Post, right? I think he's done some good work on it too, and obviously my colleague at Dexerto, Lewis Mira, he did an interview with the Navi manager, founder, I should say, who went out on the front lines. So yeah, I mean, there's been some good stuff. It's like you get those little snippets where you see like adult writing in our space, and it's always nice to see it. So yeah, to contribute with a little bit to that is, I'm in good company there. So yeah, thanks.
But it's important. It's important work, and that's why I say, keep as best you can, keep your head up. Easier said than done, obviously, for everyone. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope it's different and unique, because that's what we try to bring on the podcast, is something different than the usual talking points of whatever that you see in most of the media stuff. So thank you all, audience, for tuning in to this conversation with Richard and I. I really do appreciate it. And then if you came in midway through or whatever it might be, we'll probably split this up into two parts since it was a little bit longer. But the audio portion will be, the first audio portion will be available tomorrow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. I was with someone this week, and this made me so happy. And like the fact that we're only 13 weeks into this thing is just like mind boggling. Somebody like, we talk about those people that are like lapsed League of Legends fans. I was like at the tailgate event, and somebody like came up to me and they're like, "I remember your work from like 2016." I was just like, "Yeah, like I still do this work, but great, thank you." Anyway, and I was like telling them what I was doing, and I told them I had the podcast. I told them the name, that it was Visionaries, and they typed Vision A, and we were the first podcast to come up in Spotify, and I was just like, like that feels so good after like only 13 weeks of running here. Because I had the Spotify exclusive like podcast I was doing, and I got so bummed out doing it because it's like it was like the same story every week. It was like, this is happening, all this negative stuff, and I was just like, I gotta I'm putting this on hiatus. So yeah, I hope it has a long life. It's been good to catch up, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.